Our next speaker today is Tamer Odeh. He leads SentinelOne as Regional Sales Director for Meta. But don't let him fool you. He's actually a programmer at heart. I had a talk with him before this conference. He's what I call a hybrid, and that's what I am. It's part technical and part sales. A blend of security experience and software development, exposure to working cultures at HP, Cisco, and entrepreneurial ventures like Palo Alto Networks and Forescout has aided Tamer in his success in setting up startups across the region and building high-performance teams. Please put your hands together and welcome Tamer Odeh.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tamer. تفضل.
Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon, everybody. Today, I would like to talk to you about a topic that is becoming very trending alongside the XDR world, and it's a very core component of it. Something that we have been doing quite well with relevance to how it was in terms of protecting identity, but things have evolved, like the evolving threats that we have, the evolving solutions that we've had, but so did we have to also modernize identity. We're going to explore what does identity mean in the cybersecurity world. We are going to highlight the challenges in the cybersecurity world in general, and how does identity come and fit into that. So first and foremost, let's highlight the obvious. Attacks are definitely on the rise. We've heard them many, many times today. It's in an exponential manner. The complexity, the speed at which attackers are coming at is much farther and further faster than what we have been able to respond in. We have been trying to respond to these attacks by staffing people, putting solutions out there. The more you're putting solutions that address business needs, and the more you put solutions to defend against the attackers, the more complex it is, and you need more resources to manage them, respond to them. But we have noticed that the resources are not growing in the same pattern and as fast as the response to the attackers. It's much more linear. And what does that imply? It implies that the effectiveness of our staff, the effectiveness of our tools, is not up to speed and up to par to what we have been seeing. And therefore, we are noticing a threat efficiency gap. And one of these components that is becoming very prominent and the highlight of any attacks, like my colleague actually just started about, talking about sequence of attacks that happen in an attack kill chain. The first type of attacks that we see, and the most prominent ones, are the identity. The user's identity. The people that have access to the network, the people that their machines are connected to the network. The weakest link in that attack is the individual. Their attack, they attack the identity and it gets compromised, and that is the first step of an attack. What we have noticed, on the right-hand side, you can see the various types of identity attacks and how they have been evolving. On the left-hand side are statistics for you to show you that a very high percentage of organizations have admitted that they have been attacked initially through their identity, a compromised identity. The same people were asked, what would you have done differently? And they said, a big majority of them, that if they had the better security controls on the identity side, together with all the other solutions that they have, but primarily on identity, they would have definitely been able to mitigate the risk and avoid any business disruption. So, we have seen various types of attacks most of us are very familiar with, which is like lateral movement. All of us here have definitely downloaded Mimikatz, tested it, done the credential dump, and simulated a credential theft. But there's a rise of a new type of attacks in the identity, especially as we are addressing the migration to cloud, in cloud environments, and or becoming much more reliant onto the big vendors in the cloud space. The second type of attack that we have, which is scenario B, is a compromise of an attack at the cloud level. So we're not touching an endpoint even. And you are able to move laterally from within the cloud, and then you move into the resources there, where any, the crown jewels are, And these type of attacks are completely new. And this attack has actually recently happened for one of the large networking vendors that were here. The third type of attack is also the compromise of the credentials of the super users of the cloud environment, which can go in and switch off the security controls of that provider. And this is also public information available. So the evolution of the attack is no more just a payload or just a phishing email just to the endpoint. No, it can hit any type of environment. And the more we are addressing business needs and digital transformation and work from home, the more we are becoming vulnerable for these type of threat models. What we see here is the type of a matrix which is very aligned to what we see actually outside. So today when you talk about identity, identity is a big gamut of solutions and avenues to protect. So we talk, for example, about identity posture, identity in the cloud, security hygiene from two-factor authentication. And for each one of those, you definitely have a solution. So you see the challenge is on the left-hand side of how to protect those. Initially, for example, when an IT organization within a large corporate had to protect it, they had to protect only their staff. But if this organization connects to another business and you have a contractor, you are also responsible to provide connectivity to that individual, and you actually have to assess their security posture before they can connect to you. So the IT administrators now have a bigger responsibility the more you are connecting from B2B type of environments. On the right-hand side is the list of all the requirements when it comes to protection and identity. And I'm going to show you those also in a horizontal fashion. But when you speak identity to people, privileged access management is the first thing that comes to mind, right? Or two-factor authentication, right? But there's another world of identity that we need to start looking into and protecting. And as you can see here, also further statistics about how many people are actually having Active Directory installed, but how much of them are actually securing Active Directory. And predominantly, identity attacks happen on that avenue, where a user is going to compromise an account, do some enumeration, and traverse into the network. So most of the world of identity was on the left-hand side. It was access management. So you see IGA, IAM, PAM, privileged access management. Most of you have already done two-factor authentication or the identity lifecycle, where you are constantly checking if the user is or not the right person accessing the right tools at the right time. But the new world, which is also a very important component of the XDR world, is ITDR, Identity, Threat, Detection, and Response. And what happens is that an attacker doesn't attack all of these, or our visibility into the sequence of attacks is not consistent, because we have point product solutions that are completely siloed in every vertical or every pillar of these accesses. So you have certain controls on the endpoint, you have certain controls on the network, you have certain controls on the actual identity of the individual. And if any one of those is compromised individually, we don't have visibility on it, or the information is not shared. The vision is that how can we track and assess the various attacks, whether it happens at the endpoint, whether it happens in any part of the network, and or we can actually see an identity type of an attack and correlate them together. This is something right now that we have been pitching when we talk about XDR. In the XDR world, we were talking about how can we consolidate, reduce risk, automate a response in the quickest means possible. Now we're introducing a new area where we want to control and we want to contain, and that is identity. It would be great if we were able to detect the attack very early on, because as you can see, the further left you go in this timeline, the earlier you are in detecting the attack. And we're not just talking about detection here. We're talking about detection, protection, and response, right? I don't want to just alert you that there is a compromised account. No, I want to be able to block them. I want to be able to isolate them or ask them to authenticate again. So here we are looking at a world of how can we get an endpoint-centric threat detection, an identity threat detection, and everything that we see from each side of them, combine the two, and the output will give us something which is the early stages of an XDR solution. One of the leading analysts has said, all our nation-state attackers are compromising identity first, and therefore, identity detection and response is critical capability in any solution that is looking into XDR. So, to give you an example of how identity was really good, or the way we used to handle it with the PAM access solutions for IJAM, but now the threats are completely different, let's look at the evolution of how technology within the endpoint space has evolved, and how identity has become part of this cycle. Early 2010s, we migrated from legacy AV into next generation AV, which was very device focused. We didn't question the user, we questioned the device and the malware that landed on the device. Later on, we started analyzing it through EDR. So in the mid-2010, 2015, late 2020, we were looking at how can we identify the attack from an incident perspective and analyze it utilizing EDR solutions. So you were stacking up more and more. And now the biggest buzzword, of course, is XDR. And of course, each one of us has a different understanding of that. But let's simplify it by the various components that fit into that. XDR right now is a cross-platform integration of various solutions where we are going to try to ingest as much data from various solutions and try to correlate them and make a decision very quickly. And that's why we're saying, make sure that the first type of detection is at the identity level. Definitely the EDR is going to help. The EDR gives you the most potent type of telemetry that you're going to need. But if you can take a step earlier and kill the attack at the identity level, then you have saved yourself a lot of time. So, how do we do it? First and foremost, we need to understand what type of access and what type of users are within our network. So, you probably need to deploy some kind of a tool to identify your attack surface area. And the attack surface area could be identified in many ways. We usually identify the attack surface area, which is the complete surface area of your enterprise, by either the understanding your assets, how many workstations do you have, how many cloud workloads do you have, how many IoT devices do you have. But let's introduce also what type of access do these users have, and what type of privileges do they have on their machine and onto the network. Once you identify that, the next recommendation is plug your holes. Plug the holes of what the recommendation is telling you, reduce the privileges of certain users, reduce your access into those environments. But let's take advantage of the technology. We're already on the network. We're already on the endpoint. Why don't we understand the attack of the behavior of the attacker while they're attacking us? So the next thing we're saying is that within your network, plug in on the endpoint and plug in onto the network decoys, deception tools. Trick the attacker. Lure the attacker to show you his hand. Lure the attacker to understand how are they going through within your network. You take this information, you understand how the attacker is trying to do commands, calls, what type of payloads, what is the server that they're trying to get access to. Use that information and plug it into your XDR platform. At the end of the day, all that tools, all that data that you're understanding from these solutions, from the identity and deception solution, will help you in making your automated decisions that are also ingested from the EDR solutions. So, our objective has been met. Once you have plugged in the identity, you have a complete story here related to XDR, plugged in from the ITDR. The other recommendation is how you look into it. There's a lot of text here describing every pillar within this horizontal line, within these protection response mechanisms and methodology. But the common denominator here is to have a platform, an XDR platform, that is capable and open for you to integrate and ingest all types of solutions that you have from within. In the detection and response, we're asking you to have ITDR, which is Identity Threat Detection and Response Solutions, and network-based solutions. And then on the protection layer, mostly on the end-user layer, you have 4 pillars. You have privilege, identity, multi-factor authentication, conditional access, and attack surface management. Of course, it is going to be very hard for you to find one-size-fits-all, one vendor that's going to provide you with everything. But the recommendation here is try to find the right solution or the right vendors that are can integrate, can automate from within them. You walk around today in the floor, every one of those, there's a stand dedicated for at least 1 or 2 or 3 functions of those. But you are going to see a lot of the EDR vendors migrating to XDR, trying to consolidate and trying to reduce that workload for you. So in essence, here are the recommendations. Reduce the attack on the Active Directory. Use identity to protect the whole infrastructure. Consider deception technology, so you can understand the behavior and lure attackers into it. And respond using your XDR platform in the quickest means possible. The quicker you are able to collect the telemetry data from the various sources and pull them into a single platform that is able to understand, do the correlation, and give you not only the alert, but give me the alert, automate the response for me, and if you're not going to automate the response for me, give me a recommendation of what to do. And that way, you address the whole efficiency gap that we had. Because we're very limited on resources, attackers are not sitting behind the laptops and attacking us, face to face. They're having bots, and that's what we need to do. We need to be responding to attackers in the same fashion, if not faster, than the way they are attacking us. I hope that you were interested in what I said, and I've opened your mind onto a different perspective related to identity. Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you very much.